recording going.
And also, Joe, as we're going through this, so everybody, feel free to interrupt if you have a question or a comment. But also, I know that some people like to type into the chat window, which I won't have access to very well since because of the PowerPoint. So maybe, Joe, if you could monitor that chat window in case people prefer to ask questions that way.
Definitely. And I'll just go ahead and say right now that if you do want to ask a question, I'd prefer you use the chat so that it makes the Sorry, I think I just muted myself. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And if I'd actually prefer that people use the chat over interrupting the presentation just to make the recording experience a little bit nicer for everybody. And it's noon, so Derek, if you want to take it away. And you are still muted.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me now, Joe?
Absolutely, sound great.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know how. Did you do a mute all through the interface?
I did not, but I somehow got muted a moment ago too. So maybe it was some sort of weird Teams quirk. But
okay, well, okay, well, I can be heard now, so that's important. Thanks. I was just saying thank you, everybody. That's joining us. These remote user group presentations can be a little interesting since we're all used to that live interaction in a big room. So please go ahead and feel free to ask questions through the chat. My name is Derek Nishino, and I am a consultant here based out of the Portland area. I'm actually in Lake Oswego. I'm an independent consultant, and I've been working with SharePoint since mid-2002, so for quite a while here. And one of the big topics is for everybody is modern. Over half of my engagements, maybe 75% of my engagements, somehow revolve around modern, adopting modern, migrating to modern. And so I've put, I thought it would be good to do a session based on the experiences that I've had so far in helping people think through how they're going to adopt the modern experience. I delivered a version of this presentation last year at SharePoint Saturday. And I've over the last few days, I've gone through and updated some things in the presentation so that they match the current state of modern. But if you do see an error on one of my slides or in what I'm saying, please go ahead and feel free to make us aware of that through the chat, because I'll say this. While I am very experienced with SharePoint, very comfortable with it, including modern at this point, I don't have all of the answers. I haven't seen all of the scenarios. And frankly, with a lot of things in SharePoint, it's a matter of personal style or personal opinion. And so please keep that in mind as we're going through here. And I'm happy to hear about your experiences if they differ from mine. So first, for folks that maybe aren't as experienced with SharePoint or familiar with modern experience and what that term means, it means two things. It means the modern UI, and it means the modern architecture. And I'll talk a little bit more about both these as we go, but the modern UI is, if you've been working with SharePoint, you know what that modern UI looks like. Very, very different from the classic UI that we had previously. Also, the modern architecture, which I'll talk about. So no more subsites. Everything, if you're pure modern, everything is every site is a site collection. And so we'll spend some time talking through the implications of that, and some remediations you can do specifically around hub sites and some other topics, of course. Whenever I start talking with a company that it comes to me and says, hey, Derek, we want to go modern. I always ask them this question. I'm not trying to work my way out of a job or out of a project, but I really want to make sure that they're really clear on why they are going through this process, especially if you are going from 0 to 100. And when I say that, I mean, when I think about the transition to modern, it's a spectrum, and there are a lot of different stops on the spectrum. The basic approach is probably, hey, you know what? As we spin up new sites, we're going to go ahead and make them modern sites. Right, that's the most basic version, right? We're gonna, as Microsoft rolls things out like the updated list experience and whatever else they do automatically, we'll adopt that, and that's a very passive adoption. On the other hand, I have clients, and there's one I'm working with right now where they say, hey, we're going to rip this big old friggin' Band-Aid off right now, and we're going to go wholesale, and we're actually going to create all new modern site collections and migrate every single one of our subsites into a modern site. And so, like I said, that's a really broad spectrum with different stops along the way. And so I like to know what are the goals? Why are you doing this now? What's your motivation? And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. So some people like this company I'm currently working with that's going to the 100-mile-per-hour option right away. They're saying, hey, you know what? We want to get out ahead of the curve or stay with the curve because Microsoft is iterating through things so fast. We don't want to be stuck in the dust. So we want to just go ahead and do this migration now, or this changeover now. And when people are thinking of, the why do this now, sometimes there is specific modern experience functionality that they're looking for. So maybe they really like the new list, new list experience, or maybe they really like the new content roll-up web parts. And sometimes they have issues with classic experience. And so one of the big issues with classic is that it wasn't mobile friendly. And so maybe they really, their workforce wants to work off of phones or tablets, and the modern experience is much more conducive to that than the classic experience was. And then also, maybe there's some integration points with other Office 365 applications that you're looking for. And the list could go on. But because especially the further down the road you go, the more painful it is. I think it's really important to have a very clear reason for why you're putting your organization through this. Because depending on how far you go, this could heavily impact not just you as a SharePoint admin or your IT team, but it'll have implications for every single site and every single person working out in a business unit. That for every site that you change over, and so we have to have very clear reasoning. These are some of the topics that I talk with clients about when we start talking about modern, when they say, okay, yeah, we want to switch over to modern. And so this is just literally just this bullet list is something that I pounded out originally off the top of my head. And then I've been adding to as topics come up. But as you can see, there are quite a lot of topics here, and we're not going to be able to talk about all of them. The ones with an asterisk, I hope I marked them all, are the ones that I'm going to touch on today. But even in this hour, there's only so much depth that we can go to. You may notice that I have left off the Office 365 groups on the right-hand column. And that is because I think not because I think it is, but because Office 365 groups is a much larger topic and can take up quite a lot of time. So I didn't think it would make sense to try to address it in this presentation. Now, of course, if you're looking at this list and you're thinking, yeah, we're going to need some help, of course, feel free to reach out with me. I'm happy to chat with you and see if an engagement with you is appropriate. But hopefully, the topics that we're talking about here today will be enough to at least get you going and thinking. And as Joe said, he'll be posting this the recording on YouTube. And if we can find a place to upload the presentation, I'm happy to do that as well. So one of the things that I always do early in an engagement is I go through a current state review with my clients. Once again, this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, but I think these are the high kind of really important things to look at. So architecturally, figure out how many site collections you have, what's your sub-site depth, what does your security look like? Trying to get a handle on all of these. And then also around security, I would treat any kind of a wholesale or big changeover to modern, where you're moving subsites to be site collections and you're going to have to redo security anyway. I think that this is an incredibly opportune time to rethink security all up, go clean up sites and lists and everything else that might have individual permissions, rethink your groups. Obviously, thinking about Office 365 groups is going to be an important part of this as well. But really, it's like I said, security changes are so painful when they're done on their own. But if you do it in conjunction with this other change, I think that it's more palatable to organizations. With your sites, look at the custom templates that you're using and start thinking about how you're going to mitigate the fact that we no longer have custom site templates. We do have site designs, which I won't be talking about today, but they don't get you everything that the custom templates in the classic UI would get you. Look at how consistent the design of your sites are. So look at navigation, page layouts. If you have a traditional intranet, then definitely it's a good time to look at how consistently the different department sites on the intranet are put together. And so I'm saying intranet as opposed to collaboration internet. So the intranet is, when I think of that, is more of the kind of a communications push mechanism where we're pushing information out to the org, compared to our collaboration intranet, where we are, or our collaboration sites. I won't use intranet there. So we have the intranet push mechanism, collaboration sites, which is where teams collaborate. And so going through and looking at how consistently things are designed, one of the biggest complaints that I get from users is that their sites, it seems like every site is laid out different, has a different design. And since you're going to be going from modern, from classic to modern, and you're going to have to rebuild those pages anyway, this is a good time to look back and see if you can create some rules around consistency. You need to look at your feature use, and you'll want to take a look at the features that you use and just kind of go through what's available in modern and make sure that everything that you need in modern is, or as for features, is available. And if they're not, go look for a third-party solution, consider rolling your own solution, or change your requirements. But this is very important because we don't have feature parity at this point between classic and modern. And then another one is site columns. So because everything is going to be a site collection, that means that if you create a site column in one site collection, that site column doesn't automatically roll over to other site collections. Whereas in the classic hierarchy, if you created a site column at the root of your site collection, then every subsite would inherit that site column. And so there is a way, there is a long existing solution to this, and I'll talk about that. Navigation and branding. We'll go a little bit deeper into branding, but so with navigation, this is also a good time to rethink your organizational navigation. We'll talk a little bit more about this in hub sites. And then all up looking at your customizations. Are you using any SharePoint store apps or third-party add-ins? If you are there modern versions of these? And if there aren't, then how are you going to mitigate that? Do you have any custom code solutions that you've rolled on your own? And then any other templates you might be using, as well as search customizations. I find that search customizations typically aren't used, whether that's from people not knowing about them or because they are, maybe arcane to set up. I'm trying to think of the right word. I just don't find a lot of search customizations out there. Joe, do we have any questions or comments yet?
That's a negative.
All righty. We'll keep going. Another thing to look at and keep a close eye on is the roadmap. As I'm sure all of you know, the roadmap for SharePoint Online feature is constantly changing. Features are being updated. Features are being pushed out. I don't know that I've ever seen a feature pulled forward for an earlier release, but it might happen. And so you really want to pay attention to the roadmap. And the biggest reason is that you wouldn't want to invest in a custom solution if there's a feature on the roadmap that will do the same thing, and it's, whatever, 3 months out or 6 months out, within a time frame that you can live in. And so if you don't know where the roadmap is, I've got the URL down there. Also, you can just go and do a Bing or Google search for Office 365 roadmap, and it should, I think it's the first result that I get with either of those search engines. All right, let's talk about modern architecture a bit. And so I realize this might be review for some of you, but just in case it isn't for some folks, I want to make sure we talk about what the modern architecture is. And I think I've already mentioned that it's a flat architecture. All sites are site collections, and we don't have subsites. Now, in SharePoint Online, you are able to create subsites beneath a modern site collection root, but you cannot create a modern site beneath beneath a modern site collection. You can create only classic sites, and you will get a mixed user experience when doing this. And so I actually don't recommend doing that. I'll show you an example that I've set up in my own tenant a little bit later on. So you can see what some of the issues are. But if you even just start thinking through the UI differences between modern and classic, and having users jump back and forth between the two throughout the day, it could be a really negative user experience. And so within the flat architecture, obviously we don't have a site hierarchy to drive navigation. And so, so we simulate hierarchy through the navigation, and we'll talk about that and about, some of the things that you get with hub sites. There are navigation management implications. In the past, people liked to use the structural navigation, which Microsoft hated. And I think that's one, and the reason for that is it puts a lot of load on the servers. And so the structural navigation is a navigation where SharePoint auto generates the navigation based on the site hierarchy. And so when you're thinking about managing navigation, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about hub sites, but since by default, without hub sites, navigation is managed independently for each site. There's no overarching navigation without hubs. Then if you want to have consistent navigation elements across all your sites, you would have to keep that navigation, maintain that navigation by hand today. You understand that Microsoft is working on some other solutions around that outside of the hub site navigation, but I don't know what that would look like just yet. There's also security management implications. So in the past, when we made a security change, by default, those security changes would flow down through the hierarchy. We no longer have that. And so is somebody trying to join? And so we have to pay more attention to how we're doing security management in this modern architecture. Now, one of the mitigating factors here is that Microsoft, in doing their own research, found that most classic sites have unique permissions. So the sites might exist in a hierarchy, but for the most part, the reason that subsites were created was to have a different set of permissions from the parent. So they would break permissions inheritance. And so this may or may not cause a big change for you, depending on how permissions are done in your organization. So there may or may not be implications here around security management. And then I mentioned that the classic architecture is still supported, but my recommendation at this point is to avoid creating subsites, generally speaking, as a blanket statement. As a visual, I created this very basic chart. So we have, some people are very visual. So here on the left, we have the classic hierarchy where we have a home, where we have a root site. with elements inside of it. And then we have subsites and subsites. And so we might have a home site collection and a project site collection. And, so each underneath the project site collection, each project might be its own subsite. Over here in Modern, the whole goal I wanted to point out is that by default is chaotic. As I've mentioned, we have hub sites that can help us rein in the chaos. But I just want to drive home the fact that this is a flat architecture. So let's talk a little bit about Modern UI. So the Modern UI, as I'm sure you know, is a radical change, that radical redesign. There's so my second bullet point is not quite correct. No more page templates or layouts. You can now create, you can now save a page as a page layout, in case you don't know that. So if you want to create a templated page, you can do that. I'm sorry, not just layouts, but templates. So I had this in a project recently where I'm creating a help system, and the client wanted all the help pages to have the same layout and web parts. And so I was able to create the page laid out that they wanted, the way they wanted, with the web parts that they wanted. And there is now a save as template function, and it's very, very easy to use. I don't know that I've seen a whole lot of people talking about this, and so I think it's worth mentioning, and also mentioning that I need to update my slides after the presentation. So the Modern UI, also responsive design, so meaning mobile friendly. We have some new web parts, and in my opinion, the big wins in these web parts are the content roll-up web parts that we might have called search web parts in the classic UI. So we're talking about the news web part and the highlighted content web part are the ones that I've used the most. But these can really make for very dynamic pages that are very easy for users to keep content updated. There's no real reliable way, though. Oh, go ahead.
Quick question. Can a modern site be saved as a template with or without content? It's a question from Kevin today.
No, yeah, no, the site, modern sites cannot be saved as templates, only pages at this point. Yeah, so Microsoft's response to the saving a modern site as a template is to use site scripts and site designs. And like I mentioned, it's a pretty big topic, so I'm not going to dig into it here today, but you can go out and look at what you can do with site templates, or site designs and site scripts. There's some pretty interesting functionality there, but it does not get you all the way to what the classic site templates would. Okay. I was talking about converting classic to modern pages. There's no reliable way to do this. There is a PowerShell command. I haven't used it personally, but the demos that I've seen, so for example, there's a SharePoint community call that Microsoft runs. There's a couple of them, but particularly it was a developer community call, I think it was last fall. And somebody was demonstrating this, and for extremely basic pages, I think it will probably work. But for the most part, I don't know if it's more effort, if it makes more effort than it's worth to use the command. So when I chat with my clients about making this transition, I tell them that we need to have a plan in place for how we're going to manually recreate all of the classic pages as modern pages. And what is our strategy? Is that something that we as the project team are going to do? Or is that something that we are going to train site owners to do? Now, a lot of clients don't have people that are official site owners for their site. And so this is also a good opportunity to try to lay out some structure around that, where every department or team that has a site has to have a site owner, and they need to be trained in the basics of how to edit a page, for example, and some other site functions. But once again, just remember, this is especially if you have a lot of custom pages, this can lead to a lot of work when you're rebuilding these classic pages as modern. I've also noticed some issues with Classic. I don't know about the rest of you, but my Classic pages definitely load more slowly than my modern pages. And sometimes it seems like it's an egregious amount of time for all the elements, especially the search bar up at the top of the page to show up. Also, there are some lingering UI bugs that I run into. A lot of times, it seems like if that when I navigate from one page to another or do a page refresh, not everything refreshes correctly. I'm also seeing in some list views. So I have a view on one of my own lists where I have my proposals document library, and I have the proposals grouped by client. And although I have the view set up to show the groupings collapsed, no matter what I do, it always shows the groups as expanded when I go to the page. And I've deleted the view and recreated it, and still happens to me, but it doesn't happen on every list or library where I have things grouped. And so that's what I mean by lingering UI bugs. You will probably, if you haven't already, you will almost certainly run into things in the modern UI where it doesn't quite work right. Another place I've noticed this is if you create a Power Apps form, if you customize the SharePoint list form as a Power Apps form, what I have found is that once you fill out, if you open up an item and fill it out and save, and then go to open another item, it doesn't always refresh the Power Apps form correctly. And so I always, before, as I'm going through modifying items one at a time, when I save an item, I then refresh the page to make sure I'm getting the correct data on my Power Apps form. I'm curious, has anybody else run into that? Or am I just special? Okay, I'm guessing that nobody else is.
Kind of. Well, Derek, you kind of cut out there right when you were saying it.
Oh.
Anybody else who's running what?
Oh, Power Apps. So did I cut out where I was going to say, so with Power Apps forms, so when I've customized a list form with Power Apps, when I go and when I edit an item in the Power Apps form and then I save it and then I go to open another item, I don't always get the Power Apps form refreshed for me. And so a lot of the times what I have to do is hit the refresh button on my web browser.
Yeah, we're not using Power Apps quite yet. We're looking at it, but haven't gone there yet. So.
Oh, gosh. Yeah,
I did run into that the other day. I'm trying to think of exactly what command I used to fix it, but basically in the on visible for that screen, I put in, I can't remember if it was a reset form or a clear command, but I put something in the on visible for that screen so that every time that screen loads, it clears out the previous values.
Oh, okay. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, it's I have to say though, I'm a little, I shouldn't be at all shocked, but I am a little shocked that it was built this way so that it doesn't automatically do that for you. Okay, but yeah, I'll implement that suggestion. That's a good one. Okay. Has anybody else noticed any weird kind of UI bugs that affects their users? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on then. So more on the modern UI. So I've mentioned several times, not all classic features are available on modern pages, and these are some of the more popular ones. So content query, content editor. I left the script web part off. I guess I categorized that in my mind with the content query. Oh, no, that's not correct. So anyway, so I didn't put the script editor. I do miss that one. We don't yet have connected web parts. One that I miss a lot is being able to have independent list view configuration. So when I put a list view web part on a page, maybe I'm building out a dashboard. We in Classic, we could independently configure each of those views without having to create an actual view on the list. Obviously, we can't do that anymore. We don't have filter web parts yet. I miss web part sizing. And also, for those of you that do search customization, we don't really have custom search results pages in SharePoint Modern yet either. curious for the group, are there other classic features that you've come up against that your users really miss or complain about, or that you really miss?
I miss script editor.
Yeah, right.
We got a question in there. Please explain what a connected web part connects to.
Oh, connected web parts in Classic. So, for example, if you're building a dashboard in Classic and you had several different web parts on the page, if they all had, you could actually connect the web parts so that when you made a selection in one web part, it would send that selection to the other web parts, and all of the web parts would update automatically. So a lot of that would be driving around. So I might have a web part. And this is also where the filter web parts come in, because you connect those two. You might have, I don't know, your client list connected to your filter. And then when you make a selection from your client's list, it would filter all of the other web parts to show just the data from that particular client. And so it was very, very useful for creating dashboards. Okay. I am curious, since that question came up, is there anybody on the call where your organization is using connected web parts that you know of?
Yeah, I was using them, and I'm just building them in the Classic pages until we get it.
Yeah, there's not much more you can do, right?
No.
Okay.
We don't use them anymore. I used to use them a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully, and actually, it's interesting. I have not seen connected web parts on the roadmap yet. So maybe if it's not already started, I might start a user voice request and see if they'll pick it up. Okay. So along with modern UI topics, there's teams and there's communication sites. They're two different templates. I find that the differences between these two modern templates are not as significant as the differences in the site templates in Classic. For the most part, they have the same functionality and they do the same thing, but they are intended to serve different functions. So team sites for team and group collaboration. Whereas the communication sites are what we would think of more as our traditional intranet, right? So there again, the traditional intranet being the place where the organization can push information out to employees. Employees all up have read access, but we have a limited number of content authors, and it's very tightly controlled by the org, as opposed to the team sites, group collaboration, where it's really the team that controls their site. And so they control the content, layout, etc. As long as they fall within the guidelines of the organization. And it is a place where all members of a site should have some level of contribute or edit capabilities. So I mentioned that there are a lot of similarities. What I call their core web parts. So things like the highlighted content web part, news web part, document library web part, image, so on and so forth, are all the same across team and communication sites. The web part layout options, the web part options are the same, and just all of very similar features and functionality. But there are some key differences that I've captured. And so one of them is that with team sites, they seem to have web parts in the web part options for connecting to external services that we don't see within the communication sites. And I'm not entirely sure why Microsoft did that, but it is something that I have noticed. But like I said, all the core web parts are there. There's also a difference in the location of the current navigation. And at this point, I think I'll tab out to, where's my site? Just because this is easy to demonstrate. So if you're used to classic team sites, this left-hand navigation is called the current navigation. And we're used to it, seeing it over here on the left-hand side of the page. On a communication site, that current navigation follows here along the top of the page in the header. Okay. And so this having this navigation up here in the header made may drive your design decisions around communication sites. One of the things that I do know users like about the communication site is it gives them more design surface horizontally, so they can put more stuff or use the 3-column layout more effectively. Let's go back to the presentation. Where is that? Go. Oops. Wrong window. Pardon me. I am window challenged right now, I think. There we go. Okay, let me know if you can't see the presentation again. Okay, great. Now, also in the in team sites, you're also able to completely disable the current navigation. And so remove it from the left-hand side of the screen. But what I have found is that while SharePoint will hide that element, it shoves things to the left, it still leaves a blank space on the right side of the page. And so you're not able to use that additional horizontal space for your web parts in your page layouts. But it does turn the current navigation off. I have not found a way to do this in a communication site. Let's see, also by default, team sites are connected to an Office 365 group. Early on, this was mandatory. Today, you can create a modern team site that is not Office 365 group connected. And so that is very helpful. I bring that up and I'm going to say it again because I find that a lot of people still don't know about this, that you don't have to have a team site associated with an Office 365 group. Let's see, another difference is that communication sites have 2 out-of-the-box designs or layouts to choose from. And so that those are the big differences I've thought of. I'm wondering, anybody out there, have you come up with any additional major differences that I have missed? No? Okay. So let's I just want to revisit this slide because the next slide is we're going to go. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, you might have covered this a little bit, but one of the things that I've found is the navigation. I know you said location of the current navigation. We've had people that are like, yeah, they want the left nav on the top, like a communication site. And I haven't found any way to switch that. So they're like, oh, can you just, I'm going to request a new communication site and we're going to migrate all the content and rebuild it from scratch. And I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. So you're talking about, is there a way if a modern team site to move that navigation up to be where it is on the communication site?
Exactly.
Yeah, I have not found a way to do that. Yeah, unfortunately. Now, back in the good old classic, we'd be able to edit the master page, right?
Right. Yeah.
We can't do that anymore, regrettably. But that's actually a great feature suggestion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just such a weird thing because the sites are really close to the same. It's just that navigation's in a weird spot.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good point. Let's see. So we're going to move into hub sites now. And so I just wanted to reiterate the difference between the modern and classic architecture, where modern is flat and chaotic to start with. And so what Microsoft introduced some time ago is this idea of a hub site. And a hub site is an idea where you can take a site and say, this site is a hub, and then you can attach other sites to that hub. And so here I have just a generically named Hub 1, which has HR, marketing, finance, and some other sites attached to it. And Hub 2 with IT facilities, Project 2, Project 1. This obviously doesn't reflect any kind of reality. I was just trying to put together a quick graphic to show you that hub sites allow us to put structure around the chaos of a flat architecture. So let's get into hub sites a little bit. Hub sites is an area that I find a lot of my clients are really confused about. They've read some of the Microsoft articles, mostly press releases or a very limited blog article. And so they have the wrong idea, in my opinion, about what hub sites are and how they can be useful. And so that's what we're going to talk through here. And we'll see how my opinions match up with all of yours and your experiences. So first, some actual factual stuff about hub sites. First of all, any site can be a hub site. And so now I think a best practice could be to create a site specifically to be a hub site, but that's not a necessity. But that I find that we do that a lot with my client base. Well, like I said, any site can be a hub site. What you get with hub sites are this. First of all, you get consistent navigation. So you get consistent global navigation, and the global navigation is the navigation that runs along the very top of the page in SharePoint. And you also get to push down a color theme. Now, some of you might notice that I left off logo from this, and there's a reason I've left that off. What Microsoft doesn't explain in their documentation, and this is one of the points of confusions my clients have, is they think that the site logo from the hub site is going to be pushed down to be the site logo for all of the sites connected to the hub. And that isn't it at all. That's not what happens. Here is what it actually looks like. Let me get back to my, oh, I don't have a logo, shoot. Oh, my logo isn't showing. Okay, so what I should say is that, here we go. Okay, so I don't have a logo here, so my demo isn't set up. But here, I'll tell you what this means. So in Hub 1 Home, if I assigned a logo, the logo for Hub 1 Home would also become a logo. A smaller version would show to the left of my hub navigation. So this is my hub navigation. When I go to a hub connected site, so my com site dev is connected to Hub 1, and so I get the same consistent navigation. And if I had a logo defined, that logo would appear here to the left of Hub 1 of the Hub 1 home link. This logo would the site itself would not inherit the logo though. So that's been a pretty big point of confusion for folks. But it is nice. So Modern Team Site Dev, same way. I get the navigation, and once again, I'd get that hub logo here to the left of the hub navigation. Let's see, back to the presentation. There we go. One of the real big advantages of a hub is that it is very easy to attach and attach or detach a site from a hub, and then have that site live off by itself or reconnect it to another hub. And so this makes reorgs really, really, really easy. You just connect, you just go through and switch the hub that the group or team is now associated with, and voila, you're done. You'll start inheriting that hub's navigation and color scheme automatically.
Question for you, Derek. Can you attach finance to both hubs?
No, and that'll go. That's in my next slide. I'll talk about some limits. And but just to answer that question right now, a site can only be connected to one hub, and a hub site cannot be connected to another hub, so you can't nest hubs. So you also get a content rollup scope for your content rollup web parts. Here again, the ones that you'll probably work with the most are highlighted content and news. And in those web parts, there's a scope that say, hey, just roll up all of the news from this hub. So it's really handy to have. You also get a search scope. And I have an asterisk there. Why did I put an asterisk there? Hopefully I'll think of it by the time we get to the search section. But you also get a search scope. I remember why. And let's talk about that now. So you get a search scope in that when I am at my hub site, so the site that's defined as the root of the hub, I can start searching. And notice it says search across sites. So if I know I have this change request form on both of my attached sites, and so notice that this searches also the sites that are attached to the hub, and it doesn't search any others. And what's kind of cool is when I go to the search results page, I also get Hub 1 home. I get the results from across the hub. If we go to one of our sites that are connected to the hub, by default, it searched this site. And so if I search for change, it's only going to show the result from this site. And so this is a point of user training, because Microsoft says, you get search across your hub sites. But what they really mean is you get search across your hub sites from the actual hub site itself. But your attached sites will by default search that site alone. Now, if I do hit enter and go to my search results, and this wasn't always the case, I don't know how new this is, but you do have a breadcrumb. And so this is where you may need to train your users that if they go to the search results page, you'll get the results from that specific site first. But if they then want to see the hub results, they can actually click on this breadcrumb and see the results from all of the hub connected sites. And then, of course, if you want to see everything from the organization, SharePoint all up, you can click the organization breadcrumb. Okay. Let's see. Okay, back to the presentation, and this is very important. This is also a big point of confusion. Hubs do not set or affect permissions whatsoever. A hub has absolutely zero to do with permissions. You will still have to manage the permissions on each of the sites independently.
There's no security trimming in the navigation on the hub site, right?
I don't think so. No. And I think that's a pretty big negative, personally. But also, I know that I have heard a rumor that Microsoft is working on navigation where it would be security trimmed. I believe that they're working on getting managed metadata-driven navigation or managed navigation integrated into Modern, and that would be great. So let's talk some more about hubs. You can currently have up to 2,000 hubs, and that is a lot. I mean, that is a heck of a lot of hubs. Maybe some of the largest organizations in the world might approach that many hubs, but I don't see any of my clients, even the ones with several thousand, 2,000-3,000 users, ever coming close to needing 2,000 hubs. Also, there are no limits on the number of sites that can connect to any single hub. At least no limits that Microsoft publishes. I mentioned, because of a question, sites can only be a member of one hub at a time, and hub sites can't be a member of another hub, so no nesting hubs. And you want to be thoughtful about creating hubs. And this is where I think I start to diverge from Microsoft's guidance, or at least their marketing materials. When I read through Microsoft's information about creating hubs, it seems like they want you to create a hub, a hub here, a hub there, have hubs for absolutely everything. And so it's a conversation I have with my clients saying, we need to think through why you think you need a hub here. And I often refer them back to the slide where I say, this is what you get with a hub. So why do you need separate hubs? Why do you need a separate finance hub and a separate HR hub? Are you going to actually be doing content roll-up independently within those hubs? If not, if you can't, and that's one of the big reasons to create separate hubs, is so you can have that independent content roll-up scope. But outside of that, if you just create hubs for everything, then anytime you want to change your navigation, your global navigation, you're going to have to change it in every single hub that you have. And I have found, even with my organizations that have a couple, that are in the 1,000+ range, I haven't found much reason for them to have more than 2 or 3 hubs yet. But all organizations are different. And also, I haven't had the opportunity to engage with very large organizations. I do see in very large organizations where you have very large business units with lots of different teams and sub-teams and subgroups, where it would make sense to have many more than 2 to 3 hubs. But I still don't see where you should ever come close to approaching the 2,000 hub limit. I think that my whole point here is don't just create a hub for the sake of a hub. Make sure you have a good reason for creating it.
Derek, this is Sandra with Cambia. Since we're an organization of about 5,500 employees, we've got about 20 hubs.
You do, and can I ask you what drove that?
Well, when we used to have our main intranet site, we had a sub-site for human resources, and then a sub-site below that, and a sub-site below that, and all of the stuff that we used to do with sub-sites, we now kind of brought those over. So we have our, what we call our division sites, are our hubs. So we have one for human resources, and under the human resources hub, we have a site for, or connected to the HR hub is the benefit site, the training site, the all sorts of different things. And then we have one for finance. So payroll is connected up to that, payable, accounts payable. So those are kind of the way we've used them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and that's a somewhat larger organization than I've worked with. So let me ask you this: do you have do each of your hubs have different navigation, and so you have navigation for just the sites within that hub?
We do. Yep.
And so, given the mega menu, did you ever consider having a smaller number of hubs and using the mega menu functionality to provide a good navigation experience?
So we are using the mega menu. So we also have, we have those 20, what we call like division sites that are our hubs. And then we have one that is an overall, like our employee communication portal, like our intranet. And so within that one, we have links to all the different hubs there, but we also have like tools and resources. And anybody that wants to connect up to our main company intranet hub can do that if they're not already connected to one of the division hubs.
Got it. Okay.
But we really like the whole news roll up. And we use that a lot for like our technology hub. All of that information comes from all the different areas that we have in the IT org. And you can have that all roll up onto one location, which is really nice.
Yeah. So one of in having this conversation with clients, there's kind of been this balance to set, right? You have it's nice that you can roll everything up within the hub, but then if you want to roll some of that stuff up into another location, there's, what am I trying to say here? You would probably have to start specifying the sites that you want to roll things up to. So there's nowhere that you're trying to roll up the news all up or in pieces. Or so do people just know that that if they want to see the technology news, they need to go to the technology hub?
Yes, for the most part, but I do like the fact that with news, you can connect to different sites, but you can also, like, you can connect or bring news up from all of the connected sites that are connected to your hub, but you can also just randomly choose a site to bring that.
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely can. And so it sounds like you've struck a good balance for what for your, in the way you're set up. Now, a quick question from a management perspective: do you have people that do you have the people in the division or business unit that own the sites, and so, or is IT managing all of those hubs and sites?
We let the management or the site or the division area manage their own hub, so they take care of that. But in the admin console in Office 365, the SharePoint admin console, in there you can specify who can connect sites to a specific hub.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious how you were doing that. So having the management of the hubs spread out, I think really mitigates any kind of change management that you might need to do.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, awesome. I appreciate that perspective from a fairly large organization. You said over 5,000 users, right?
Yep, exactly. And we're all remote now.
You're all remote now, right? Yeah, and so for much larger orgs, I can definitely see the more hub sites. I would say, just so you have perspective, the overwhelming majority of the organizations that I've been doing work with are probably in the 1 to 300 person range. And so there are some differences, in what you can expect from those organizations than what you would expect from a much larger org.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's move on. Does anybody else have any thoughts about hubs or any commentary that they would like to add, like Sandra's? Shared learning helps us all.
There's a couple questions in the comments. So one from Megan Daniels. Would you recommend that that this be based on ownership? Megan, if you'd like to chime in and clarify that.
Oh, that's okay. Do you mean by based on site ownership? So having hubs, and like what Sandra was talking about, having people in the division or in the team that owns their site and owns their hub. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I asked the question before she started talking, and that was a great example of the use.
Yeah, so I would say as a longtime SharePoint architect, whatever, I would say absolutely, if you can, the best practice is to have the people that are actually using those sites day to day having ownership of the content and general management of it. And that, of course, means training folks and all of that. Okay, what's the other question, Joe?
Two more. Next one is, you might have mentioned this. How do you sell this change, classic to modern?
So I usually, so when I come in, a lot of times the decision has been made, but when folks ask me for help for selling the project to the larger organization, there's some low hanging fruit, such as like if you have a internal marketing or corporate communications department, showing them what you can do with a modern SharePoint intranet in terms of content roll up, how much nicer it is. Those sorts of things for the intranet portion are very valuable. When we're looking at the collaboration portion, I think that the UI, in spite of the limitations of the UI today, I think that the modern UI is overall easier for users. I find that users do like having things like the conditional formatting in columns. I usually talk them through how the modern SharePoint integrates with a product like Teams, which most of my clients are already using, and kind of the synergies between Teams and SharePoint and other services like Power Apps and Power Automate. And then, but I really think a lot of it does come down to that the nicer UI, the ability to view things also in a mobile device. And so I know that's kind of a broad answer, but I also find that it's not the same thing for all organizations. Yeah. Was there another question? I just realized we only have 4 minutes left.
Yeah, another question in here. Does Microsoft recommend hub sites as opposed to regular sites?
So, I mean, so yes. Yeah. So hub sites are a way to organize your sites, right? It's not a specific type of site. And so it's more of a designation. So when you want to create a hub, you pick a site that's going to be the hub. And like in Sandra's case, where they have a division site, an overarching division site that becomes the hub. And then each of the sites for the teams and the division, each of those team sites is connected to the division hub. So it's not a special kind of a site. It's just something you designate a site as. And so you should be using hub sites to organize your sites.
And I'll mention too, Derek, on ours, I don't know if other companies do this or not, but we've disabled the ability for people to create subsites.
Oh, good. Yeah, I recommend that. Yeah, just in case you have some people that like to explore and do stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another follow-up question, kind of like channel sites in Teams then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could think of it that way. I not strictly speaking, but the same kind of idea, I suppose, where you have an overarching grouping that you put sites within, then yes. Although I'll say, just so people aren't confused, by having channel sites, those aren't also being connected to a hub, right? So teams and hubs are separate.
Any other questions?
No? Okay. So I'll start talking fast. So branding, I'll just say very limited in the modern UI. You can set the color scheme, sort of. So there's some limits there. And you can set your site logo. Beyond that, everything else you used to be able to do is out the window. Unless I've seen some blog posts where they're doing custom fonts, for example, and really super custom CSS by writing a custom modern add-in. But I don't recommend doing that. Try to live within what you can do with the color scheme and logo. And Microsoft is working to make that better. You can mix modern and classic. I recommend not doing this any more than you have to, because it introduces complexity. And it also can be a very negative user experience. And so I recommend doing what Sandra said. Her org has, I think it was Sandra that said that they've disabled the creation of modern subsites off of modern sites. I recommend doing that because those subsites will be classic sites. Obviously, there's some mixed mode already. So you on a classic site, you can have a modern experience for lists and library. But I was hoping to do a demo of this, but really this can really introduce some UX issues from usability. There are a large number of scenarios possible. About the only mixing that there are a few mixings that I like. So modern sites only with the classic enterprise search center I think is good, because there's still some things in the classic enterprise search center that you don't get in modern search. But otherwise, try to keep things separate. Site columns and content types. I mentioned at the beginning that site columns are scoped to the site collection. And so in modern, you aren't able to share by default content types across site collections. And so the answer to this is the content type hub, which has been around for quite a long time, at least since SharePoint 2013, if not further back. Don't confuse this with a hub site. All that the content type hub does is it allows you to create content types and site columns in this particular site, and those site columns and content types will be pushed out to every site collection in your tenant. And you do have, every tenant has a content hub pre-configured, and it's just your tenant URL. Oh, this should be HTTPS, tenant URL/site/content type hub. And so this can be part of a big change. So if you do use content types extensively in your classic site hierarchy, then you're going to have some work to do for creating recreating content types in the content type hub, and then doing some column replacement in your data migration. It's 101. I'll say, so the last topic I had was search. And so I'm just going to go over a couple of minutes and do a quick search demo. The modern search does have a cleaner UI, but it does lack some of the advanced functionality of classic search. So you don't, for example, get result sources. I may be wrong at this point about the bests and promoted results. I didn't double check that. You also have fewer out-of-the-box refiners, and we don't have a search deduplication. And so I'll show you what I mean by these. So within the modern search, when I search for change and I go to my hub, I get the change request form result from every single site in the hub. And if I were to go to organization, it would show wherever I have this form in the organization. In SharePoint Classic, it would actually only show you one result, and then in the flyout in Classic, it would have a view duplicates option. And so that's one change. That's one difference here within Classic. The other difference, if you don't know what result sources are, is result sources allow you to search, allow you to define specific paths, URLs, whatever it might be, within SharePoint. And so, for example, and they used to appear on, used to be able to make them appear on the search dropdown, which we don't have anymore in Modern. And so here I created one that searches just Modern Pages. And so I can click Modern Pages and it'll just show me Modern Pages. It also appears, I can also make it appear in search dropdowns, which I hadn't on that other site. So if you're using this functionality today, just understand that this is not available in Modern at this point. At least not, I haven't found a way to make it available. And so that is one of the reasons I say that it may still be very useful to continue using the Classic Search through the Enterprise Search Center. So thank you, everybody, and I appreciate all the participation and points of view. We're a little bit past time, so I'll officially wrap up now, but I have some time to stick around if there's any more questions or comments.
I got a question. Do you have any recommendations for tools for helping convert some of the sites?
So I don't. There really isn't I haven't seen any tools that actually convert sites. In terms of also, when I think of that, I would think of converting classic pages to modern pages. I know that ShareGate has a promote site capability, but I've been hearing that there are some serious limitations with it. But I haven't used it myself just yet.
We're looking at so our intranet, top level site was migrated from SharePoint 2007. And using ShareGate. So we still have a lot of stuff in there that's basically SharePoint 2007, and I'm looking to modernize it. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to try to just do an in-place update there or create a new site collection somewhere. And then I just saw that we can now change our root site via PowerShell and just basically scrap everything, build a one from scratch, and then make that the new home site. What do you think is what is your recommendation?
So just totally broadly speaking, not knowing anything about what's actually there, if you can, I'd start clean, and I do the site swap.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I was just going to mention the search functionality, the best bets and promoted results. They've actually replaced that with bookmarks now. And it's super cool and really easy to use. And you can import your list of best bets right into there, and they're all set up for you.
Oh, I hadn't seen anything on that, so I will have to go check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing that I found in there too is you can now put locations in there. So in the Microsoft Search admin console, you can put your location, and then people can search for that. Since we're across multiple geographic areas, it's pretty cool. And then they also have a new acronym feature.
Okay. Oh, neat. That's helpful. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That gives me something to go look at. I'm glad. I'm especially happy to hear about the bookmarks, because that was something that I felt was really missing.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, thanks for your time today. I super appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everybody. This posting, the video will be posted in just a few days, hopefully today or tomorrow, on our YouTube page. And Derek, if you send me the slide deck, I will get it posted on our meetup pages.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks everybody. That was very helpful.
Glad I could help. Bye-bye.